On Friday, January 10th, 2026, President Donald Trump stood in the White House surrounded by oil and gas executives and delivered a statement that sent shockwaves through European capitals. "We are going to do something on Greenland whether they like it or not," he said, his voice matter-of-fact, as if discussing a real estate transaction rather than the sovereignty of a NATO ally. "If we don't do it, Russia or China will take over Greenland, and we're not going to have Russia or China as a neighbor." It was not the first time Trump had made such a threat, but the timing was chilling. Just 1 week earlier, American Special Operations Forces had conducted a surgical strike on Caracas, extracting Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro from his own palace and flying him to the United States to face narcotics charges. The operation had stunned the world with its audacity. And now, Trump was making clear that Venezuela was not an isolated incident. It was a demonstration, a warning. "I would like to make a deal, the easy way," Trump continued. "But if we don't do it the easy way, we're going to do it the hard way." Within hours, Denmark's Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen issued a statement urging the United States to stop the threats. The Prime Minister of Greenland, Jens Frederik Nielsen, called Trump's rhetoric disrespectful and asserted that our country is not for sale. But the message from Washington was unambiguous. The Monroe Doctrine, the 19th century principle that the Western Hemisphere belongs to American influence, was being rebranded as the Donroe Doctrine, and it was being enforced with a level of aggression not seen in decades. The threats did not stop with Greenland. Trump turned his gaze south. He suggested that Cuba was ready to fall and would not need American intervention because the regime was collapsing under its own weight. He called Colombian President Gustavo Petro a sick man and accused him of running cocaine factories. When asked if he was threatening military action in Colombia, Trump replied, "Sounds good to me." The pattern was clear. The abduction of Maduro had not satisfied the administration's appetite. It had emboldened it. And at the center of this new wave of territorial ambition was not just strategic positioning or political grandstanding. It was about resources. Specifically, it was about Greenland and what lies beneath its melting ice. The meme had appeared in August 2019. It was crude Photoshop work, almost deliberately amateurish. It showed a golden Trump Tower superimposed onto a photograph of a Greenlandic fishing village, the garish skyscraper absurdly out of scale against the pastel-colored wooden houses and the dark mountains behind them. The internet treated it as the punchline to a cosmic joke. Late-night comedians riffed on the idea of the president trying to buy the world's largest island as if it were a foreclosed golf course. Stephen Colbert joked about purchasing Iceland as a consolation prize. The Danish Prime Minister, Mette Frederiksen, called the proposal absurd. The story lived for a news cycle, provoked 1,000 memes, and then disappeared into the endless scroll of outrage and distraction that defines modern media. But in the classified briefing rooms of the Pentagon and in the secure floors of the State Department, no one was laughing. The generals and the strategists understood something that the public missed entirely. The offer to purchase Greenland was not a whim. It was not a joke. It was a signal, a desperate and clumsy attempt to address a strategic vulnerability so severe that it threatens the technological and military supremacy of the United States. Because beneath the ice sheet of Greenland, locked in ancient rock formations that are only now being exposed by climate change, lies the single resource that will define power in the 21st century. The modern world does not run on oil anymore, at least not in the way it used to. The 20th century was the age of petroleum, but the 21st century operates on a different fuel. It runs on a group of 17 chemical elements with names that sound like they belong in a science fiction novel. Neodymium, dysprosium, europium, terbium, lanthanum, cerium, praseodymium. These are the rare earth elements, and they are the vitamins of the digital age. The term rare earth is somewhat misleading. These elements are not particularly rare in the Earth's crust. The problem is not scarcity, the problem is concentration. Rare earths are dispersed throughout the planet in tiny amounts mixed with other minerals. Finding a deposit rich enough to mine economically is difficult. Extracting and refining them is even harder. The chemistry is brutally complex because the 17 rare earth elements are chemically almost identical. Separating them requires industrial processes that involve massive quantities of sulfuric acid, hydrochloric acid, and other toxic chemicals. The waste products are radioactive and environmentally devastating. You cannot build a smartphone without rare earths. The screen relies on europium and terbium to produce the red and green pixels. The battery contains lanthanum. The vibration motor uses a neodymium magnet. A single iPhone contains trace amounts of nearly a dozen rare earth elements. You cannot manufacture an electric vehicle without them. The battery pack in a Tesla Model 3 contains approximately 10 kilograms of lithium, cobalt, and rare earth compounds. But the real dependency is in the motor. Neodymium magnets are extraordinarily powerful for their size. A neodymium magnet the size of a coin can lift a bowling ball. Every Tesla, every Nissan Leaf, every electric bus rolling off assembly lines is powered by motors that depend on neodymium magnets. You cannot construct a wind turbine without them. A single large offshore wind turbine can contain up to 600 kilograms of rare earth materials in its generator. Without neodymium and dysprosium, the turbine becomes too large, too heavy, and too expensive to be practical. The green energy revolution is entirely dependent on rare earth elements, and most critically, you cannot build advanced weapon systems without them. An F-35 fighter jet contains nearly 450 kilograms of rare earth materials. The stealth coating uses rare earth compounds. The radar systems use yttrium and europium. The guidance computers rely on lanthanum-based components. The electric actuators use neodymium magnets. A single Tomahawk cruise missile contains dozens of rare earth components. The entire American military machine is built on a foundation of materials that are processed almost entirely in China. And here is the nightmare that keeps American military planners awake at night. China controls approximately 90% of the global processing capacity for these elements. This is not an exaggeration. It is the reality of the global supply chain as it exists today. Beijing has spent the last 3 decades methodically and ruthlessly cornering the market. In the 1990s, Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping reportedly said, "The Middle East has oil. China has rare earths." It was a statement of strategic intent. The Chinese government subsidized their rare earth mines heavily, allowing them to sell at prices that Western competitors could not match. They ignored environmental regulations, dumping toxic waste into rivers and farmland to keep costs low. They built massive processing facilities that could refine rare earths at a scale no other country could replicate. They created a vertical monopoly, controlling everything from the mines to the refineries to the factories that turned purified rare earths into finished magnets and components. And then, once the competition was dead, they showed the world what happens when you control a monopoly on a critical resource. They showed that rare earths are not just an economic commodity, they are a geopolitical weapon. In September 2010, a Chinese fishing trawler collided with Japanese Coast Guard vessels near the disputed Senkaku Islands. Japan arrested the Chinese captain. China demanded his immediate release. Japan refused. And then, without any formal announcement, China stopped exporting rare earth elements to Japan. The effect was immediate and devastating. Japanese factories that manufacture electronics, automobiles, and precision machinery found themselves unable to source the materials they needed. Toyota could not build hybrid cars. Nissan shut down production lines. Sony could not manufacture camera sensors. The Japanese economy was brought to its knees by a bureaucratic export restriction that lasted only a few weeks. Japan capitulated. They released the captain. The rare earth exports resumed, but the lesson was learned, and it sent a chill through the capitals of every developed nation. The message was unmistakable. Control of rare earths is economic power, and economic power can be leveraged without firing a shot. The Pentagon watched this crisis unfold with growing alarm. They realized that the United States had sleepwalked into a trap of its own making. For decades, American policymakers had allowed the domestic rare earth industry to die in the name of free trade and cost efficiency. The Mountain Pass mine in California shut down in the early 2000s. It could not compete with Chinese prices. Other mines closed. Processing facilities were dismantled. The expertise was lost. The supply chain was offshored, and no one noticed because rare earths were cheap and plentiful. But now, the most powerful military in the world was dependent on a strategic rival for the materials needed to build missiles, jets, and satellites. If China decided to cut off rare earth exports to the United States, the American defense industry would face a crisis within months. The technological edge that has defined American military dominance since World War II would erode. This is where Greenland enters the story, because Greenland is sitting on top of what may be the largest deposit of rare earth elements in the world. The Pentagon has been searching for a way out of this trap for over a decade. They have explored deposits in Australia and Vietnam. But none of these sources have the scale or the concentration to break the Chinese monopoly. None of them can match what lies beneath the ice in southern Greenland, in a place called Kvanefjeld. Kvanefjeld is a black mountain overlooking a small town called Narsak. Geologically, Kvanefjeld is a freak of nature. It sits on top of the Illimausak complex, a geological anomaly that contains one of the highest concentrations of rare earth elements ever discovered. Estimates suggest that Kvanefjeld alone could supply global demand for decades. It is, in the cold calculus of geopolitics, the Saudi Arabia of the future. But extracting these elements is not simply a matter of digging. The rare earths at Kvanefjeld are mixed with uranium and thorium, radioactive elements that turn what might be a straightforward mining operation into an environmental and political minefield. The proposed mine would be an open pit, a massive scar carved into the mountain. The dust would blow over Narsak, a town of 1,500 people who make their living from sheep farming and fishing. The runoff could poison the fjord. For years, a bitter debate has raged in Greenland over whether to allow the mine. It is a debate that pits economic development against environmental preservation, the dream of independence against the fear of contamination. And it is a debate that has become a proxy war for global superpowers. Greenland is a self-governing territory within the Kingdom of Denmark. In 2009, autonomy was expanded significantly. Today, the island handles its own domestic affairs, including education, healthcare, taxation, and resource management. But Copenhagen retains control over foreign policy, defense, and currency. Greenland relies on an annual block grant from Denmark worth approximately $560 million, which accounts for about half of the government's budget. Crucially, however, the ownership of mineral resources belongs to the Greenlandic people. Any revenue generated from natural resource extraction goes to the Greenlandic treasury, not to Denmark. This creates a powerful incentive for development. If Greenland could develop its mining sector and generate enough revenue, it could theoretically become financially independent from Denmark and declare full sovereignty. This means that a population of 56,000 people holds veto power over a resource that could reshape the global balance of power. The decision of whether to mine Kvanefjeld is made in Nuuk, the capital of Greenland, by a parliament of 31 members who represent tiny constituencies scattered across an island 3 times the size of Texas. The company that held the license to mine Kvanefjeld for years was Greenland Minerals, nominally an Australian firm. But if you trace the ownership structure, you found that the largest shareholder was Shenghe Resources, a massive Chinese conglomerate with close ties to the Chinese state. Shenghe is one of the largest rare earth processors in the world. This set off alarm bells in Washington. The nightmare scenario was playing out in real time. China was about to pull off the ultimate strategic coup, not just maintaining its monopoly on processing, but also owning the primary alternative source of supply. If Greenland Minerals succeeded in opening the Kvanefjeld mine, the rare earths would flow back to China for processing. The monopoly would remain intact. China would control both the existing supply and the alternative. It would be checkmate. This was the context of Donald Trump's offer in 2019. It was not about real estate. It was about breaking a chokehold. The offer was rejected, but it achieved its purpose. It signaled to Beijing that the United States would not stand by while Greenland fell into the Chinese orbit. It forced Denmark to wake up to the strategic importance of its Arctic territory, and it opened the floodgates of American attention and money into Nuuk. The State Department suddenly opened a consulate in Nuuk. High-level delegations began making the long flight to the Arctic. Aid packages were announced. It was a charm offensive designed to counter Chinese influence. And then, in April 2021, the Greenlandic people went to the polls in an election that was, in effect, a referendum on the mine. The pro-mining party was swept out of power. The new government made its position clear immediately. There would be no uranium mining. The Kvanefjeld project was dead. In Washington, the reaction was mixed. The immediate threat of a Chinese-controlled uranium mine had been neutralized. On the other hand, the rare earths were still in the ground, and the American dependency on China remained intact. The problem had only been deferred. But the story does not end with Kvanefjeld. Just down the coast lies another deposit called Tonbreeze. Unlike Kvanefjeld, Tonbreeze does not contain significant amounts of uranium. This makes it politically viable. The company developing Tonbreeze has emphasized environmental safeguards and promised that the mine would be cleaner and safer. The Pentagon has taken notice. They have begun to treat rare earth mining as a matter of national security. They are funding the construction of processing facilities in the United States. The goal is total decoupling from Chinese supply chains. But building a rare earth supply chain from scratch is extraordinarily difficult. The 17 elements are so similar that separating them requires massive amounts of acids, extreme temperatures, and precision equipment. The process produces toxic waste that has to be stored for decades. For 30 years, the West was content to let China handle this dirty, dangerous work. Now, we have to relearn how to do it ourselves. The irony is brutal. The transition to green energy depends on mining operations that scar the earth and produce radioactive waste. Greenland is the perfect symbol of this paradox. The melting of the ice sheet, caused by climate change, is exposing the minerals that are needed to build the technologies that might slow climate change. We are destroying the Arctic to save the Arctic. While the economic battles rage, the military dimension of Greenland's importance has not been forgotten. During the Cold War, Greenland was the shield of North America. That is why the United States built Thule Air Base in the far north in the 1950s. The base remains one of the most important assets in the American missile defense network, but the strategic value of Greenland has evolved. In the 21st century, its value is its resources and its access to new shipping routes, As the Arctic ice melts, new sea lanes are opening up. Greenland sits at the gateway to these routes. Control of Greenland means control of access to the Arctic Ocean, and control of the Arctic Ocean will be one of the defining strategic competitions of the coming decades. Russia has been militarizing its Arctic frontier for years. China has declared itself a near-Arctic state and has been building icebreakers and investing in Arctic infrastructure. The United States is now scrambling to catch up. Greenland is the prize in this new great game. The Chinese strategy in Greenland has been patient and methodical. They offered to build airports. They offered to fund mining projects. It is the same playbook they have used in Africa and the Pacific. The Danish government, under pressure from Washington, intervened to block some of these deals. But the competition is ongoing, and the Greenlandic government is well aware that it can play the superpowers off against each other. The people of Greenland find themselves at the center of a geopolitical storm. They understand that the sudden interest from Washington and Beijing is not about their welfare. It is about the minerals under their feet and the strategic location of their island. But they also understand that this attention gives them leverage. On January 10th, all 5 political parties in Greenland's parliament issued a joint statement in response to Trump's threats. We do not want to be Americans. We do not want to be Danes. We want to be Greenlanders. The future of Greenland must be decided by the Greenlandic people. But the United States is not backing down. The Trump administration has made clear that it views Greenland as a national security priority. The extraction of Maduro from Venezuela was designed in part to send a message that the United States is willing to use force to secure its interests. The threats against Cuba and Colombia reinforce that message. And the escalating rhetoric on Greenland suggests that the administration is prepared to use economic, diplomatic, and potentially military pressure to achieve its objectives. The future of Greenland is uncertain. If the ice continues to melt, more deposits will be discovered. Companies from Canada, Australia, and Europe are exploring the coastlines, but the rare earths remain the ultimate prize. The battle for Greenland is a microcosm of the larger struggle that will define the 21st century. It is a struggle over who controls the materials that enable modern technology. It is a struggle over who gets to set the rules for resource extraction in a warming world. It is a struggle between environmental preservation and economic development, between sovereignty and dependency, between the old powers and the new. The United States did not buy Greenland with a check in 2019. The Danish Prime Minister rejected the offer, and the world laughed. But in 2026, with the shock of the Maduro extraction still reverberating through global capitals, the administration is signaling that it is prepared to acquire Greenland through other means. The threats are no longer subtle. The economic pressure is mounting. The flag that flies over Nuuk is still the red and white of Greenland, but the shadow cast over the island is the eagle and the dragon, circling and watching, waiting for the ice to melt and the treasure to be revealed. The joke from 2019 is not funny anymore. The stakes are too high. The ice is melting at an accelerating rate, exposing more mineral wealth every year. The minerals are waiting in the frozen ground, locked in rock that has been hidden for millions of years, and the future of technological supremacy, of military dominance, of energy independence, is being decided on a frozen island that most people could not find on a map. After Venezuela, after the threats against Cuba and Colombia, the world is learning that when this administration says it will do something the easy way or the hard way, it is not bluffing. Greenland is watching, Denmark is watching, China is watching, and the world is holding its breath, waiting to see if the next great geopolitical earthquake will be measured not in bombs dropped or soldiers deployed, but in tons of neodymium extracted from a black mountain in the Arctic. Subscribe now and stay ahead. When history is written, you'll be one of the few who saw it coming. If you think there's something we missed or a topic you want us to cover, let's discuss it in the comments.